So Boruto episode 117 is done and in the books, and I gotta say this, man. Last week I told you guys on the front end, I said that was an episode where I had mixed emotions. I asked myself, what the hell am I watching? And then at the end of the episode, I was like, okay, there were a few good things on this, but I didn't fully enjoy the episode like I thought I would. This week, I actually enjoyed this week's episode a lot more than I did last week, and there's a few different things, right? There are a few different things. I think when you get to episodes like this, a lot of people, they look at it and like, oh my God, there's not any action. I don't particularly care for this. And I'll say pump the brakes for a second. So what I definitely think that the writers for this episode did do well is we got some expansion into the world building. We found out more about the Dai village. I thought that was pretty cool. I thought that was pretty cool that we found out more about that through the interactions with Souma. I thought that that was pretty cool to see the flashback with the Shrine Maiden and find out that essentially Remon and Kankitsu have these seals on their hands that show that they're the descendants, and even Konohamaru steps in when he tells Boruto that no, I don't think she's lying about this because there are beasts that exist that break the laws of physics. You know, my grandfather entered into a contract with one of these beasts, and that's how he lost his life. So I like that because it's tying into stuff that we already know exists in the Naruto universe. So I do like that. You know, if you guys have been longtime followers, you know that I've said on more than one occasion, like I want to see more of this insane sealing jutsu that the Uzumaki clan has, and to see that there's a beast that seals away memories, that steals them, to see that the Shrine Maiden was using some type of sealing jutsu, that kind of gives me hope that, you know, one of the things I've wanted to see, which is more sealing ninjutsu in the Boruto series, I think that we might see some stuff like that. So I thought that was cool. I really did. But I will say this much. This episode felt packed with information. It felt packed. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I will say that I feel like this is one of those instances where maybe somebody should have stepped in and told Kodachi and the writing team, like, hey, you might want to slow this down a little bit and flesh out a few things that you're touching on. And I'll give you a perfect example of where this has been done in the Boruto franchise earlier so you guys can kind of see what I'm talking about. So I want you to imagine episodes 8 and 9 combined into one episode. That means you're going to cut some of that stuff out, but that'd be a combined episode. For those of you who need a refresher, that's when Naruto and Boruto, they go to visit Hinata's father, and Boruto has that sparring match with Hanabi, and they start talking about Boruto potentially having the Byakugan. Okay, now Masashi Kishimoto stepped in, and I have a video up on my Kryptonian Saiyan channel where I talk about Kodachi having Kishimoto step in and Kodachi being told to break this up. So when you look at that, okay, there was a lot of information in those two episodes. There were a lot of information in it, and if that had been in one episode, you would have felt bogged down. So there were times where I felt like I was getting a lot of information to process. And again, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I like to think, but at the same time, if some of this stuff would have been broken up and fleshed out, I definitely think that this could have been a much better episode than what we got. I'm not saying it's a bad episode, but I think that it didn't fully reach its potential. I really didn't think that happened. So with all that out the way, so basically with my, I would say, nitpicks out of the way, I gotta say, man, so there were a few things I did enjoy about this episode. I like how when the episode starts up, you got Konohamaru and Boruto, they're meeting with Remon, and Ramon's fiance just drops this bombshell. Okay, Kankitsu drops the bombshell and he says, hey, you know, you can take that handkerchief and get out of here. You know, that's my wife to be. We got stuff we need to take care of. I don't care about you, Konoha Ninja. Like, you're intruding on our privacy. And it explains why Remon is just all of a sudden doing a 180. Like, she legit treated Konohamaru like she was just DTF down in the village, and they ended up smashing, and all of a sudden, you know, Konohamaru catches feelings. She's just like, yo, that was a one-time thing. I ain't that chick. Like, that's one of those things that I was like, yo, she got a really cold vibe, and I was like, yo, that's what that feels like. That's what that feels like when all of a sudden, like, you hook up with somebody a few times, and then you just stop answering their text messages, or you tell them like, yo, like, I ain't really into you like that. I love that attitude, and I like how Boruto's just like, yo, Konohamaru, you really gonna take that? Like, I really feel as if there were moments where Boruto's looking at Konohamaru and he's like, big brother, you were so lame. But I get it as a viewer, because what Konohamaru was doing is he understood, okay, we're in another village, We have no information about what's going on here. We don't need to get involved in this until we have some time to think up a strategy and kind of weigh all of our options. And for a moment, Konohamaru looked like he was going to leave and go back to Konoha. What ended up happening is Boruto, through the methods of talk no jutsu, basically talks to him and says, like, big brother, like, if you just look at how she was acting, Remon wouldn't act like that in the village. She seemed like a different person. Now she gets here and she's cold all of a sudden. And what I found really interesting is that's all it took. It took a little bit of a prod and Konohamaru went right to it. And so it just shows you that, Konohamaru is catching feelings. He's catching feelings. Like, and they're doing some of the cheesy stuff that you see in some of the shoujos and other romance stories. So not just in anime, but in other romance stories, like when Konohamaru's thinking about her, he looks up at the moon, and how Remon is holding on to the handkerchief, and just little small things, man. It's like little small things. I totally get it, okay? Because I mean, sometimes you do have to spell it out like that. So I'm not gonna zonk or knock these series for that, okay? I'm not gonna do that. But what I will say is I would have liked more of an interaction between Konohamaru and Remon when Konohamaru and Boruto, they visit her and she's recalling everything that happened in the Hidden Leaf Village. And one of the things I think that they're trying to set up is, let's say Remon just has a huge case of she just loses all of her memories, right? She forgets everything, okay? And we know there's gonna be Kankitsu who does it. But let's just say that she loses her memories. Well, what's gonna end up happening, and I feel very confident in predicting this, I bet she holds on to those memories of what happened in Konoha. I bet that they do that, because that's one of those things you would see in a romance story, okay? So I mean, I could definitely see something like that. They're going out of the way to try and establish a bond with Konohamaru and Remon. That's something that they are going out of their way to do. So I think that they're gonna pay that off. I really think they're gonna pay that off. Now, so another thing that I did think was pretty well executed was how you have the little girl, okay? After Boruto and Konohamaru leave the village and they're on the way back to Konoha, they have the little girl who all of a sudden doesn't know how to get home, okay? And she really reminded me of Himawari in a way, okay? She really reminded me of that because of just that innocent nature. And Boruto, being Boruto, uses that as an opportunity to say, hey, Konohamaru, hey, we should take her back home. And Konohamaru knows it. He's not necessarily a prick. He's like, okay, we really need to take this girl home before she gets lost, eaten up by some wolves or something. Or who knows, there is a creepy pedo snake who likes little children. I mean, legend has it he likes children with shiny red eyes, but you never know. Test tube babies are always test tube babies, right? So I totally get why Konohamaru's like, okay, we can take her home. But when they take her to the village and the little girl's saying, it's like I don't remember how to get home. I don't remember anything. And just the looks, the expressions on all those villagers' faces, that was very telling. That was very telling. And even Konohamaru picks up on it. He's like, okay, something isn't right. And after they see those expressions of all the people inside the village, Konohamaru once again gets prodded by Boruto to go speak with Remon again. And right away they notice that, okay, security is a whole lot tighter than it was. And Boruto's like, hey, big brother, this doesn't seem right. This doesn't seem right. We just come to visit her and all of a sudden security basically doubles, triples, quadruples. Like, what's going on here? And what I really like is how one of the things you're seeing is like Konohamaru, it's almost like he's using Boruto as an excuse to do things that he wants to do. Now, one thing I didn't particularly care for with this, I know I said that I had gotten all my stuff that I didn't like out of the way, but I gotta slip this in here because it was something I was debating on. And that is, I didn't particularly care for the fact that like every time Konohamaru has to make a decision, it's almost like Boruto has to push him along. He has to push him along. Boruto, I could see why Boruto would be the compass for Konohamaru in this instance, but at the same time, like I would think Konohamaru being 26, 27 years old, I would think that Konohamaru at this point would have enough of a backbone to make his own decisions, especially with something like this. I understand the whole thing about mission parameters and everything. I totally get it, okay? I totally understand that, but I would think he would have more of a spine in this. And so what's interesting is how once they get to Remon, once they get to her, they right away, they notice, okay, she's being locked up, you know, she's happy when she's speaking to her. She's not cold anymore. And even Boruto says, like, I don't understand. It's so cruel for you to be locked up like this. It's so cruel. And yet you're saying you're gonna willingly marry this guy. Why do you have to marry somebody to use a sealing jutsu? And that's where I kind of had like a moment where I went back and forth about Boruto being here, because I understood on one hand, I was like, okay, they're using Boruto as a way to be Konohamaru's moral compass for the decisions he makes. And yet at the same time, you need Boruto's blunt nature and just his childlike innocence, because at the end of the day, Boruto's still a child, and he just calls it like he sees it. Okay, like he calls it in the most elementary way, and he says, well, I don't understand why you have to get married to just seal away a monster. Like, there are all kinds of sealing jutsu. Why don't you use one of them? And that's something I really enjoyed right there, because it just sets the stage for the viewer to let them know that there's more to what's going on here. There's more to it. And so what's very interesting about this is how Remon all of a sudden just flips Konohamaru's earlier words back onto him, where she says, well, your grandfather gave his life for the village, and it gave me courage and strength to go through with this ceremony. And it's one of those things to let you know, like, if Konohamaru didn't say that story, there's a chance she might not have returned to the village. I mean, I would like to think she would have gone back anyway out of a sense of duty, just because of the type of character she's being written as, but I still think that that is something that might have been a possibility, because again, Konohamaru gave her the strength of the conviction. Now, you could argue that Kankitsu's men probably would have found her anyway and taken her back. I mean, that certainly is possible, but here's one other thing that I find really suspicious, okay? And this is why I think that this might very well be a genjutsu. So you mean to tell me that over the course of 400 years, nobody in Konoha, nobody affiliated with the Uzumaki clan, knew anything about any of these people losing their memories? I find that really hard to believe. I find that really hard to believe that this goes back to before the Warring States era. This goes back to the early times of the Uzumaki and the Senju clan being in an alliance after Konoha's founded. Stuff like that. You mean to tell me that nobody knew about this village that appears to be close to Konoha? Now, on one hand, it could be a retcon, but at the same time, because it's set in the confines of the story, it's a question we have to ask. So I definitely think this is just a genjutsu. I think this might be one of those instances where everyone in the village has their memories altered to a certain extent. And I think the best way to compare it would be if you go and look at what Doflamingo had done on Dressrosa, where all the people were turned into toys, their memories, they had their memories, but the people they loved didn't have their memories. I think something like this is going on here in the Boruto series. I think Kankitsu's reach is going even further. I think that's the whole purpose of his clan. And that kind of brings me to the final arc of this episode, which is Boruto and Konohamaru get a request from the old lady who's an attendant for Remon. And she says, like, okay, Kankitsu didn't used to be like this. You probably heard it from Lady Remon. Well, I want you guys to investigate him. And she notices, like, you know, this guy's going out at all hours of the night. And I think that this is when he's finding his people to erase their memories. I think they're making it pretty obvious. And what I found really interesting about this, what I really found interesting is the fact that Boruto and Konohamaru, they observe him and they say, well, he just went back to sleep. And it's like, you can't make that decision that there's nothing going on if you just watch him for one day. You can't really make that decision. I think that was poor judgment at this point. And what I really like about it is how when Kankitsu goes to speak with Remon and she's looking at that handkerchief, you know, the first thing is, it's like he didn't go through a door, so how did he get in there? That's the first thing. That's the first thing. You mean to tell me she was looking down at that handkerchief and didn't hear the door open and close, and this dude has time to walk and get in a blind spot? So that lets you know that there's something else going on with this guy. There's something else going on with him. And I want to kind of just say this. I don't want to start a huge theory war in the comment section, but I think it's something we have to look at. If you look at one of the abilities that Kaguya Akitsuki has, she has the ability to erase memories. And this Souma creature, okay, when you look at it, it has horns. Kaguya and the Akitsuki have a horn. I'm not saying that necessarily this is something that's going to be connected to it, but what I will say is that all these Boruto side episodes, I don't want to call them filler because I don't consider them filler, even though you have the main story of the manga, because Kodachi's writing this and overseeing it, and because these episodes do in a very loose way connect to stuff going on with the manga and the novels. I would just say this is something interesting. I find the timing extremely interesting when we find out that there's more about the Akitsuki clan that we didn't know. And we know that Kaguya and her descendants were on Earth for an extremely long period of time. So it's not crazy. It's not crazy to think that there might be some type of very loose connection there. That isn't crazy. Now, what I do want to kind of close with, what I want to close with on this is how after Remon, you know, tries to take back her handkerchief and Kankitsu's looking at it and says, okay, an insect got in, he makes his mind up. Okay, it's time to go into damage control. And I think that's why in the next episode preview, Boruto has lost his memories. So I want to know from you guys, I really want to know from you guys, what are your thoughts about there potentially being a connection with the Akitsuki? And I was so hesitant to even ask this because I don't want to have one of those situations where I build up expectations for an episode and for the arc that are unreasonable. But I mean, it's something that popped in my head when I'm watching the episode. And then my other episode question to you guys is, do you think that they should have broken up this episode into 2 episodes? Let me know down in the comment section below. But as always, guys, if you like anything I had to say, don't forget to comment, rate, subscribe, share. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. Have an awesome day, guys.